Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today. This is pre-K to kindergarten transitions. It's time for kindergarten, getting transitions right. And we're so glad that you've joined us today. I want to take a few minutes just to introduce ourselves. I'm Judy Stevenson Garcia, and I will be one of the co-facilitators of this peer learning community opportunity that we're introducing to you today. And I'm here with my colleague, Mimi Howard. She's another one of our co-facilitators. And also with us here today is Faith Tabafor, and she is our technical support for the webinar. And she is also one of our specialists on the team who is giving us technical support throughout our peer learning community opportunities. So again, thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to sharing with you some information about the preschool to kindergarten transition and why it's important for children and families, and also the opportunity to engage in peer learning communities so that you can build strategies for supporting children and families through transition from preschool to kindergarten. So before we get started, just some housekeeping about the webinar features. The chat box is available to use to to ask questions, to say hello. If you need technical support, you can chat with Faith in the chat box directly. There's going to be some polling opportunities within the webinar, so keep an eye out for that. Closed captioning is available. The link at the bottom, if you need closed captioning, you can click to activate that. And then again, as I mentioned before, Faith is here to offer any support with technical difficulties. If you need that, you can click in the chat box directly to message her, and she can help you out if you're having any technical difficulties with the webinar. So here's our agenda for today. We just introduced ourselves, but we want to hear from you and hear who you are. So you can introduce yourself in the chat box, tell us who you are, where you're from. And then we're going to take a little bit of time and talk about the preschool to kindergarten transition. We know that in early learning settings, and especially when children are under the age of 5, they go through lots of transitions. But today we're specifically talking about the transition from preschool to kindergarten. And we'll take a little bit of time just to talk about the current context within your state and some information that we've learned about kind of what we've heard from the community about some current challenges in the context for children and families as they move from preschool to kindergarten. We'll take a little bit of time to talk about why transitions matter and why we're focusing on that today, and why it's so important to have strategies related to thinking about transitions. And then we'll tell you about this peer learning community opportunity and how you can get engaged and what you need to do, the next steps to get engaged in that opportunity. So first, preschool to kindergarten transitions in Michigan. We had the opportunity to learn from the Yaffe Consulting Group, who did some interviews with preschool and kindergarten teachers and families. They gathered some information about experiences and thoughts that the community members had about transitions and kind of their ideas about what they wish they had experienced or what they did experience around transitions, and just their thoughts about the process and maybe where there were some challenges that they faced. And so what the themes that kind of came to the top from those conversations were that depending on where they lived and their community, their children's exposures to kindergarten differed depending where they lived in the state. And I think this is something that we hear that's pretty common across states, is that children have different opportunities and families have different opportunities to engage with kindergarten or their school programs or their school communities before they start kindergarten. It looks very different depending on where they live. So there might be open enrollment. Districts might reach out to preschools to sell their programs, or quote unquote sell their programs, say, hey, this is where our school is and this is what school is going to be like. In some districts, maybe only the children will participate, like they might get on a bus and go to school and have a snack, or have a story time or play on the playground and meet the teachers, but the parents aren't engaged in that process. And in some districts, maybe only the parents participate. So they might get to meet the teacher, but the children never go to the school. So there are a lot of different opportunities to engage, but they all look different depending on where the parents and children lived. And this is another thing that we know is that due to COVID, there were a lot fewer children who had the opportunity to attend pre-K. So some parents kept their children home on purpose. Some parents didn't have access to pre-K. Some children ended up going to virtual pre-K, so they were at home for their pre-K. And so children who have been home with their parents for the last year and a half have been more isolated, had fewer opportunities to engage with other children or have those learning opportunities that they would have normally had in preschool settings. And so that definitely has been a common theme across the communities that we've spoken to. Another thing that was heard was that pre-K and kindergarten teachers would like more opportunities to communicate with each other about children's abilities during this transition period. So having the chance to share information about children's academic and social emotional development, and kindergarten teachers would find this information especially helpful. So if you work with kindergarten teachers, you understand how important it is to know as much information when children come into the classroom. The more information they have, the better, so that they can really understand what children know and are able to do. And preschool teachers love to give that information as well, saying, I know this child, I've just spent the last year with this child, here's what I know about what they can do. So both sets of teachers expressed that they would appreciate opportunities to be able to share that information. And then finally, parents mentioned that it would be helpful for them to know before children enter kindergarten what is expected for their children to know and be able to do, so that they could have opportunities at home to be able to support children's learning. Maybe if they had activities or some guidance around how they can support their children at home, so that they feel like they're really able to help their children be prepared for kindergarten. Parents express that they would really appreciate kind of knowing what to expect, so that they feel like they're doing what they need to do to help their children get ready for school. So these were common themes that kind of came out of the conversations, and I hope none of these are new to you. These probably sound like things that you've heard if you've talked with parents or teachers. And these are all reasons why it's really important to have a plan or strategies around engaging families and communities, and transition strategies and transition plans. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Mimi to dive in a little bit deeper around why transitions matter and why it's important to think about transitions for children and families.
Thanks, Judy. And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I have a feeling we're probably preaching to the choir today in many ways about transitions and why they matter, but we did want to take just a few minutes to just do a very high level review of what we know about transitions and why they're so important for children and families. So I'm going to do a little bit of review about that, and then spend another couple minutes talking about the important role that preschool and school leaders, administrators play in the transition process. And then I'll pass it over back to Judy to give you more information on the PLC itself. So transitions and why they matter. We all of us through our lives go through any number of transitions. And as Judy mentioned, even children prior to 5 years old have experienced a number of transitions in their lives. But we do know that the transition from home or preschool to kindergarten is an especially important developmental milestone for young children and for their families. And it's one that can impact their ongoing school success. When they enter kindergarten, children experience a number of changes, such as changes in the physical setting where they're actually learning, the peers that they're interacting with, the teachers and adults in their room and in their world, expectations, routines, and schedules. All these things tend to change for children as they move into the kindergarten year. And those kinds of changes can cause some stress. And they can disrupt learning and adjustment if they are such that they're not getting sort of the supports that they need to kind of navigate them. And so we do know that both children and families need support to navigate all of these changes, both during the preschool year and then as they enter and throughout the kindergarten year as well. We also know from research, as this slide says, that almost 50% of children usually experience some sort of challenge as they transition into kindergarten. And as we discussed, because of this, that puts children at a greater risk for falling behind or not being able to meet the academic challenges and social adjustment problems that naturally come with this transition time. We also know that for low-income children and families, for children who are dual language learners and children who have disabilities, that they are actually at greater risk for having some challenges as they enter kindergarten. So again, it raises the issue of the importance of making sure that all children, regardless of their settings and their needs and strengths, have the opportunity to make a good positive adjustment as they move into kindergarten. The good news is that we know that with good planning for supporting children and families in making the move from kindergarten to, from preschool to kindergarten, sorry, it can make a huge difference for children and their ongoing school success. And so I just want to give you a few of the things that we know from research about the impact of transitions on young children and families and what we know about most effective practices. So lately, there has just been within the last year a meta-analysis that looked at all transition practices in place right now and their impact not only on children and families, but also on state systems. But the findings were really quite significant in terms of some of the important takeaways that they found in terms of what practices tended to be the most important and the most effective for positive ongoing success and adjustment in school. And there were three big takeaways that this research study found in terms of effective practices. The first was that transition practices cannot use a one-size-fits-all approach, that every child and every family needs a tailored and specific kind of plan that helps them to adjust based on their own context, their own needs, and their own strengths. The second big takeaway is that transition practices that engage families have the most impact. And third, that implementing a well-rounded combination of practices is the most effective strategy for supporting successful adjustment and movement into kindergarten. So as Judy mentioned, there are a number of different opportunities and ways that families and children can be engaged. And the more diversity you have in terms of when and how children and families are exposed to some of those learning opportunities, the more effective the transition is going to be. In terms of impacts on children and families themselves, the research also has some pretty promising information for us to think about. So we know that when transitions are well planned and successfully implemented, that they result in reduced stress and higher ratings of social emotional adjustment and competence at the beginning of the kindergarten year for children. We also know that children spend much less lost time, if you will, in making adjustments. They're able to move into the process and adjust quickly, thereby not losing important learning time that otherwise would be sacrificed while they're trying to sort of find their way and make adjustments in their new setting. On the flip side, we know that when transitions are effectively implemented, that academic gains that have been made in preschool are sustained and that children are able to more quickly make improvements and gains academically in kindergarten as well. We know that when families are engaged in the process, they tend to be much more involved and present in supporting children's learning in the kindergarten year. And one of the important findings that has important implications, I think, for us now, post-COVID, is that family engagement is really tied specifically to children's improved rates of attendance. So the more children, the more families are engaged, the more likely it is that their children will be attending school on a more regular basis, which we know is a huge issue right now for many children. Research this is past research, but focused specifically on children and family who are low income, have demonstrated that these children and families really benefit the most from these effective transition practices. So again, this idea of, tailoring and ensuring that plans and supports are aligned to the needs and strengths of families is incredibly important and does have payoff and big benefits. And then finally, the last thing that we're finding is that as we all know, there's been a growing focus on educational equity, and especially post-COVID, I think that it has elevated our understanding and the imperative to ensure, as I just mentioned, that transitions supporting children with disabilities in particular and children who are dual language learners becomes a key focus of transition work that schools and preschools are involved in going forward from here on out. So that, in a very small nutshell, is what we know from the research and from best practice around why we should care about transitions and what are some of the things that we can do to ensure that transitions are successful. And before we move on, I want to just take another couple of minutes to talk about the important role that administrators play, both in the sending schools, early learning programs, and in receiving schools, K-12 programs. Administrators play a hugely important role in ensuring that transitions are successfully implemented and carried out. So again, one of the key findings from the research that I mentioned at the top of this presentation has to do with sort of what are some of the key elements of effective transitions. And we know that effective implementation of policies, plans, and practices requires joint buy-in and one-on-one collaboration and communication between early childhood and the K-12 sides of the transition process. And we know that school leaders and early childhood program leaders are essential to that process. Now, this expectation is not new. It's been around for a while. Those of you that are associated with Head Start know that it's been a key part of the expectations around creating better transitions and alignment across and coordination across Head Start programs and receiving elementary schools. But it's becoming clearer and clearer from the research that it's a very big part of the success is to make sure that both sides of this process, both sectors, are equally engaged in contributing to the process. And as I said, that program leaders and school leaders are really instrumental in making that happen. In an early work that was conducted by Cowers and Kaufman that looked at, actually created a framework for streamlined and effective preschool through K-3 systems, they found that leaders, again, played an important role in the transition as an important part of creating that preschool to third grade continuum, and that the roles that leaders played specifically that contributed to the transition process were first, demonstrating visible leadership, secondly, fostering teamwork and cross-team collaboration, cross-sector collaboration, and finally, providing instructional leadership. So big area, big ticket approaches to leadership that administrators and program directors can take. Those are the three big roles that they can play. We also know that there is lots more information out there in terms of what specifically program leaders and school administrators can do to support this transition. One study that is out there actually calls program and school leaders the cornerstone of transitions. And I think that kind of says it all in terms of making sure that whatever is planned and implemented is successful really falls back to the importance of the engagement of the leadership in the process. So here are just a few of the ways that leaders can demonstrate and be engaged in the transition that are much more specific than what we just talked about before. So first of all, in their role as instructional leaders, administrators can play a big role in facilitating and leading learning opportunities that deepen understanding of the importance of transition and provide opportunities for families and staff to work and plan to create effective transition approaches and strategies. Secondly, as mentioned above, they are sort of responsible for creating a culture within their school or program of collaboration and can sort of lead the way in terms of demonstrating what that looks like for families, among staff, and with the community at large. And in that regard, they also play an important role as role models for families, staff, and communities. So seeing leaders in the community, reaching out to and engaging with stakeholders, meeting themselves one-on-one with family members and with staff are important ways for leaders to demonstrate their commitment to this work of creating transitions that are effective. An important role that administrators can play is establishing policies and procedures that support planning, implementation, and cross-sector cooperation in the transition process. It's the leaders who are capable of making sure that these kinds of policies and practices are really deeply implemented and become part of the sort of the fabric of how schools and programs operate. The other role that they play is more in regards to creating more formal policies and procedures across sectors by spearheading MOUs, leading the creation of data sharing agreements and those kinds of things. So some informal and then some very formal ways that leaders can play their role as sort of the leaders in creating policies and practices for their programs. And I think finally, I just think the importance of what's really emerging now as sort of an important way of considering and thinking about transition. Leaders can help move the conversation from thinking about transitions as a purely child-focused experience or strategy. So we're talking not so much about the child leaving preschool and the child going to kindergarten and how that individual child is able to do that. We want to move away from that sort of single sort of focus on the child to a more broader collaborative approach to and way of thinking about collaboration and using collaboration to create more sort of holistic opportunities for children that includes families, staff, program leaders, and community members in the process. So the next slide just kind of gives you a very brief overview of the 4 points of connection that are really emerging in the literature right now and in practice among programs and school districts and schools in creating plans and working together to create transition plans that are proving to be much more effective in terms of meeting the goals that we've just been talking about. So there are 4 community connection points. The first one is the community to school connection. And that connection point is one in which administrators and staff collaborate with community-based partners to provide resources, spread information, and plan community-based activities and opportunities that sort of support the transition to kindergarten. And there's a number of great examples of how communities can be very actively engaged in making transition much more sort of a community event as opposed to a school or program event. So that's the first connection, and it can be a very valuable one to utilize and to work to develop those relationships. The second connection is child to school. This is the connection that most of us are sort of aware of in terms of what it looks like and what it entails. Child to school connections are those in which administrators and staff intentionally support children's familiarity with new buildings and classrooms, expectations, routines, and learning opportunities, and the people that they will engage. So, as Judy was mentioning, taking a ride on the school bus or visiting a kindergarten classroom, getting a welcome letter from the kindergarten teacher. Those are all kinds of things that are important to do to create that better alignment for children in making the switch to kindergarten. The third connection, program to school, is one in which the leaders and staff from both settings, that is sending and receiving agencies or programs, work together to provide children with consistent, supportive transition learning experience. So this could be a transition summit held during the summer that engages both the school personnel and early childhood personnel. It could be joint professional development for early childhood and kindergarten teachers. It's all the ways that there can be much more alignment and sort of continuity across sort of how programs themselves operate with staff and with administrators working together. And last, but certainly not least, is the family to school connection, in which school and program staff and leaders partner with families to increase their understanding and support their sustained involvement in the new school. So as we were listening to Judy talk about some of the needs within Michigan and some of the things that families have said, this seems like a really important one to sort of target in terms of making sure that families have the information that they need and have the opportunities to ask questions and feel comfortable about how they're involved and what they can sort of expect for their children as they move on. So those are the four connections that we will be talking about throughout the professional learning community as a way to structure plans for effective transitions within the groups that will be working in the PLC. And I think that's a pretty good segue to turn this back over to Judy to give you more information on the PLC itself. So thanks for listening and hope we see you all soon at a PLC.
Thanks, Mimi. I think this is a great way to transition to, because I think one thing that we've heard is that when we talk about transition strategies, there's some confidence in supporting the child's school relationship before kindergarten, but the other three are where there are some challenges, especially the program school relationship. We're making connections between early learning programs and the kindergarten programs. There's a lot of challenges there. I mean, we heard earlier that kindergarten preschool teachers would like more communication around children's abilities, but I think also there's a lot more than just the teacher to teacher communication, the program to school communication and interaction. Like you mentioned, even shared professional development is a great strategy. And then the family school and community school connections are another place where we've heard that there are challenges in building those connections. I think one thing that we heard was designing materials or resources that reach diverse families with diverse needs is one area where there's lots of opportunity for growth. And so those are all places where we're hoping to support those who are going to be joining our PLC, designing strategies and resources to build up in those areas. So let's go to some information that you're all here to learn about, which is this Transitions Professional Learning Community. And so I'll share a little bit of information about this opportunity and what we're hoping or what we're planning to offer through this opportunity. So what it's going to be and what we're going to offer is 5 virtual learning opportunities between July and November of this year. The first 2 will be happening this summer in July and August, and those are going to be focused on administrators. And so Mimi and I will be there, we'll be co-facilitating, and we will really focus on the administrator role in supporting transitions and building some strategies around those four connections that we just mentioned. And then the 3 sessions in September through November will hopefully be a shared space with teaching staff. So the administrators who join the PLC, we will be focusing in the summer on what you can do to build strategies as an administrator, and then hopefully you'll be able to have a teaching staff member join you in the fall so that you can start thinking about implementation strategies and have teaching staff support you in thinking about what it takes to implement transition strategies, because we know we need teaching staff to really help us think about practical application and implementation of transition practices. So these sessions are designed to do these couple of things and more. What we really want to do is engage participants in opportunities to hear from and interact with content experts. Not just me and Mimi, we're hoping to bring in some other content experts as well to learn about transition strategies, peer experts who will be you and your colleagues, and also have colleagues lead working sessions and problems of practices. So this is not going to be a webinar series. This is not going to be just you listening to us. We really want you to bring your problems of practice. We want you to bring your expertise if you have great strategies that you're already using, so that we can all learn from each other in this working space. We want to give you tools and resources into practice. We're hoping to offer you opportunities between the peer learning communities to go back to your programs or to your districts and think about how you can put strategies into place, or to build plans. If you don't already have transition plans, you might have to go back to your communities to think about and talk to other people in your communities about building some strategies together to put into place. And then also, finally, I think this is maybe one of our primary goals, is for you to develop some meaningful relationships with your peers and develop networks of knowledge sharing, so that after December, you will know who to call when you are turning to implementation or continuing to design strategies. You will know who you need to turn to within your communities, within your peer learning communities and networks, for people who you know are working on the same things. So we're really hopeful to have a good group of people join us so that we can work on these transition plans together. The other thing that we're offering, along with the peer learning communities, is some individualized TA opportunities. So what we're hoping here is to provide some responsive opportunities to work with you individually as you move toward whatever your specific goals are in transition, because we know many of you are in different places with transition planning or transition implementation. And so between July and November, we'll offer, these are optional opportunities for you to engage with us individually to work on specific tasks that you may be working on in your program or in your community, just to help you really wherever you are, to meet you where you're at in your community or in your program, to give you some guidance and some support around your specific needs. And really, we'll just kind of do that on an as-need basis related to your specific needs, and we'll kind of play that by ear as it comes, but we're just happy to provide some space for you with your teams. If you have a team, you can bring them on board, and we can work together to really help you think strategically about where you want to move forward so that you can put some things into place. So that is the opportunity, and I'm sure you all have some questions about logistics. So for some immediate next steps, there is an interest survey that that we will send a link to, that you can use to express your interest in participating. There's some questions about who you are, what your role is, what your current transition activities are, if you have transition activities that you're currently using, what your availability is to participate, or your interest in participating in both the PLCs and the TA opportunities. and if you have anybody who you think might be interested in joining you in the PLC. So both, so right now we're looking for administration level participants. And then in the fall, we're hoping you might have a teacher who would be willing to join you in the PLCs. We are looking for people who have the capacity to participate in all of the PLCs and are interested in taking part in some of the TI activities if possible. You can join as an individual administrator, or you can join with up to 2 other people with you. So if you have, if you're a building principal and you also have an early childhood coordinator in your district, and you both want to come together, that's great. If you are the director of an early childhood center and you want to come on your own, you can do that as well. If you have an assistant director and the 2 of you want to come together, you can sign up as well. So you're welcome to come as an individual or come as a team. But we are capping the applications for teams at 3 people because we want to keep this open to as many communities as possible. So the interest survey is open until June 17th, and then we will be reviewing the applications and letting people know the last week in June. And then the first PLC will be meeting in the middle of July. And all of the dates for the PLCs are listed on the interest survey. So you can take a look on the interest survey and just see if you will be available. That will definitely help you know if you are interested. And we will accept as many people as we can because we're really excited for this opportunity and excited to work with you all on this topic. And but we do have a cap because this is virtual. So we also want this opportunity to be as engaging as possible. So we will do our best to accept as many people as we can. And I think that's it. Mimi, did I miss any details?
No, I think that was it. Thanks, Judy.
Okay. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. And otherwise, we will look forward to communicating with you further in the summer. And we are excited to jump into this. We're really excited that so many people are interested in this opportunity. So we're looking forward to working with you. And just as a note, all of the resources that we pulled together for this PLC will be made available to everyone who has expressed interest. So we're going to make sure that we share this information far and wide. We will make sure to spread the word. That is another goal of this PLC, is to make sure that this information does not stay inside the PLC. We want to make sure that we share all of the resources and that we build capacity for you to share information with your communities. So we're hoping to do that as well. So thank you for your interest and for your time. And we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. So, and thanks, Mimi.